This is Taniqua Williams, guys, and my paper is on the interpersonal deception theory. This is for Comms 522, Dr. John Cassian being a professor, and we'll give a high-level overview of the interpersonal deception theory. Where did it come from? Its assumptions, the context and relationship, interactivity, bias and suspicion, and accuracy of judgment. If you're watching this video now, you can see an actual shot of my family here. My family was presented in the first scenario. In the scenario, you saw my 4 daughters, Davia, Tanaya, Tabria, Demia, and their dad, David. So we came up with the interpersonal deception theory, and we decided to apply this theory based on a scenario that happened to us at the circus last week. My daughters were all given money for chores that they completed around the house. When we went to the circus, I instructed all the girls to bring their money if they wanted to purchase something. And when we first got to the circus, one of the girls didn't follow my instructions and didn't bring her money at all. Who was that didn't bring their money? That was Demille, right? And then one of the girls brought their money but didn't want to spend their money, kept saying, oh, I want to buy something, but oh, I don't know what I want to buy. Who was that? Right, that was Tabria. And then we had one person who had money but did not want to let go of it. Do we know who that was? That was Davia. Davia didn't want to spend her money. And then we had one little girl in particular who was very eager to spend her money and said, oh, I want to buy this. As soon as we went out for intermission, she went to go buy it. Do you know who that was? That was Tanaya, exactly. So, with that being said, in the scenario, were you able to tell who was being deceptive? If so, who was it and why? Let's apply this to the real life scenario of the interpersonal deception theory to get the answers to this question. First of all, deception involves the deliberate manipulation of information, behavior, and image in order to lead a person to another false belief or conclusion. Typically, when a speaker deceives, that person engages in strategic behavior that distorts the truthfulness of information or conveys incomplete, irrelevant, unclear information. And this comes from Littlejohn and Foss, 2011, page 188. In order to fully understand the complexities involved in interpersonal deceptive theory, one must examine all of the surrounding factors that play a part in shaping one's perspective, thus leading to the type of behavior one exhibits while engaging in an act of interpersonal deception. In the scenario you just saw, the surrounding factors included enticing snow cones. Girls, where are the snow cones? Okay, so those are the cups that were enticing, and these cups all had different prices on it. $12, $13, $11. There was a different range of the snow cones. Another enticing factor that came through was the competition between the girls. So the girls had competition basically internally of who had the most money. Did you guys notice that you did that as part of your problem, that you were trying to say, oh, well, I have the most money? Who ended up having the most money? Me? You didn't even bring yours. So who ended up having the most money? Can we point it out?
I think it was Tanaya.
Yeah, it was. It was Tanaya that had the most money. Another factor that came into play was all of the lights and actions and stuff that was going on around the circus. There was a want or a need to have something because everyone else had it. IDT is intended to predict and explain deception in the context of interpersonal interactions. In this case, the interpersonal interaction was between my daughters and I, along with their accounts of what happened versus what actually happened. With that being said, let's examine where IDT came from. IDT was developed by David Burgoon and David Buller and Judy K. Burgoon to offer an alternative perspective to prevailing psychological perspectives on deception. Growing out of several decades of research into credibility and interpersonal communication, it is an interrelated set of assumptions and propositions of testable statements drawing on principles of interaction communication to predict, explain deception and interpersonal interactions. Its scope is thus deception during communication, which can include face-to-face, public, computer-mediated, or virtual communication. To date, there have been over 20 experiments that have been conducted testing the various aspects of IDT. Many but not all have received support. So IDT is not meant to focus on one single cause, but instead to provide a comprehensive depiction of the communication relevant factors in deception message production and deception detection. And that comes from Burgoon 2009 Interpersonal Deception Theory and the Encyclopedia of Communication Theory. Which leads me to a different part of the IDT, which is assumptions. Assumptions are the given in a theory that underpinned it, but is not tested. It assumes first that the interpersonal interactions placed on all parties in the simultaneous role of sender and receiver. A central assumption regarding the deception is that sizing up the credibility of the communications is an inherent part of all communications. So even though we typically occurs on the subconscious levels, we can gauge another's truthfulness in its implicit part of all human encounters. So in this scenario, just because I was the mother and I was paying attention to my daughters, I was able to gauge the truthfulness of each girl's behavior. Knowing the facts and the history of my girls gave me questions for the assumption that were given. So as a part of the outcome, it ultimately came to my decision of who was being deceptive. So in this particular scenario, when we went to the circus, guys, do we know who was being deceptive when they were purchasing their snow cones? Tanaya. So before we knew it was Tanaya that was being deceptive, did we believe her when she said, "No, Mom, it wasn't me"? In the video, she said, "Mom, it wasn't me. You know, I had this money." Is that the truth? Did we believe her when she first said it?
No.
Y'all didn't believe her? Oh, so if y'all didn't believe her, that means y'all have a bias, because you should have believed her, because that's your sister, and she wouldn't lie to you, because why would she do that? She always do that. So another key assumption is the details is saying that it's strategic behavior. It could be behavior or image management. So Tanaya's image, has it been tainted? What is tainted? David, what is tainted? Because Tanaya wants to know what tainted is.
Has it been?
I don't know what tainted means.
Has been going on for
So tainted means your image is been bruised. It's not good anymore. People don't believe what you say to be exactly what the truth is.
Right. So at the same time, other non-strategic or unintentional acts may occur, producing unnatural behavior, damaging performance, and undermining credibility. And that comes for Burgoon 2009 as well. So as you saw in the scenario, since we're dealing with children, it created both strategic and non-strategic deliverance of deception. The strategic behavior that was exhibited was in the actual act of taking the extra money. Tanaya was the person accused of taking the extra money and lying about where she originally got it from, claiming that the money was given to her from me, but leaving out the fact that she actually took the money from someone else. So the non-strategic assumption was that she wouldn't even be caught in this action. She wouldn't even be questioned about where the money came from. So Tanaya, do you think we were right or wrong in questioning you about where the money came from?
Yes.
Were we right or wrong in questioning you?
Right.
All right.
Okay, so that leads me to my next point, and my next point is context and relationship. There are two central propositions when dealing with relationships: the deceiver and receiver's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that vary systematically with access to nonverbal cues or conversational demands, and the other one is the deceiver and the receiver's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that vary systematically with relationship familiarity and relation valence. The context of relationship affect the way people communicate. Telling literal truths that are designed to mislead should be considered deception as well. This comes from Dunbar 2009. So did Tanaya tell a literal truth?
A literal truth.
Yeah.
Did she tell a little? No, she didn't.
So when talking to my daughters face to face, it was able to trigger different reactions. And although early person perception researchers studied individual differences in rating actions, it all came to a crashing halt, according to Kenny and Albright, 1987, page 390. With the famous critique of simple discrepancy scores, which advocated instead of breaking accuracy down into actual components. And so seeing the tears roll down Tanaya's face when I accused her of lying made the deception all more believable. Even with me doing the math, it was like impossible for her to have $16 left after she spent $12 on the snow cone, and so the math didn't add up. But just looking at her face, we were kind of wondering, is she telling us the truth? Did she really have money before then? Where did it come from? So all of that played a part in what she was doing. And given that deception is typically embedded in ongoing interaction rather than being judged as an isolation event, and given that judgments made of naturalistic interaction differ from those that are made a brief experimental control stimuli, and that comes from Motley and Camden, 1988. So this is the knowledge of how people make veracity judgments should be founded on in different kinds of stimuli and how they normally would react based on those brief snippets of what actually happened during before time. And that comes from Burgoon, Blair, and Storm in 2008, which brings me to another part of my theory, which is interactivity. Interactivity is the proposition that there is more interactive communication context, that the deceivers or increased strategic activity and reduced non-strategic activity over time draws on the factors of nonverbal cues, access to assumptions about the interaction dynamics, strategic activity, and the cognitive demands of deceptive message productions. Based on the tight-knit family that we have tons of interactivity. So let's see if the girls can pin down who was actually being deceptive. Girls, do you know who was being deceptive in their practices? No? Yes? Maybe?
The deceptive one was Tanaya.
Was Tanaya. Okay, and we have Tanaya being deceptive as part of bias and suspicion. So we automatically have a bias and suspicion towards Tanaya, not because Tanaya has not told us the truth before, but Tanaya has not told us the truth before. So assuming that Tanaya was telling the truth, either we have a truth bias or we have a lie bias. Either way, we were able to determine where the truth was coming from, so we were able to determine who was actually being deceptive. So by now, you should have a good grasp of the interpersonal deception theory, which brings me to my conclusion. To recap, the interpersonal deception theory was developed as an alternative to the psychological perspectives on deception. IDT was formed out of decades of research with over 20 years of experiments leading to its finding. And based on the scenario presented, we can see how assumptions, bias and suspicion, context and relationship, interactivity, and accuracy of judgment all come into play into everyday life. As mentioned in Galatians 6, chapter 6, verse 7 and 8, do not be deceived, God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that he will also reap. For the one who sows into his own flesh will from his own flesh reap corruption, but the one who sows into the Spirit, from the Spirit will reap eternal life. So, ladies and gentlemen, what's the lesson learned here?
Well, honest and deceptive.
Honest and deceptive? Is it?
Hey guys, ready? 1, 2, 3. Honesty is the best policy.
In other words, always tell the truth. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. God bless you.
Wait.